The hum of the colony's alarm system echoed through the streets as panic spread like wildfire. Buildings shook under the weight of the Dravak warships hovering ominously in the sky. These ships weren't just a symbol of impending doom. They were harbingers of death. They were massive, like the claws of some unfathomable beast, and they moved with purpose. The Dravak had arrived. Commander Aiden Pierce stood at the front of a hastily assembled command center, his jaw set in grim determination. His fingers danced over the controls, issuing orders to his scattered forces. His mind raced, processing the data with frightening speed. The Dravak didn't make mistakes, but humanity's greatest strength was their ability to adapt in ways no other species could. The Dravak had never fought an enemy like them. They were about to learn that firsthand. Deploy all units, get our fighters into the air, and make sure the civilians are underground. Pierce barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. His officers scrambled to obey, but his mind was elsewhere, focused on the task at hand. His forces were outnumbered, their technology inferior in comparison to the Dravaks. Yet, Pierce felt an instinctive calm. His people had something the Dravak didn't: resolve. And it was time to show the galaxy just what humanity could do when cornered. On the surface, panic gripped the population, yet there was something else in the air. An undeniable sense of defiance. The Dravak had underestimated humanity. They thought they could simply walk in and exterminate the weak. But humans were resilient. And now, the galaxy would see that. The first explosion rang out in the distance, followed by another. It wasn't the Dravak. It was human resistance. Earth's forces had set their first trap. Pierce's strategy was simple: force the Dravak into the open, and then hit them with everything they had. Guerrilla tactics, traps, ambushes, anything to break the Dravak's momentum. But as the day wore on, it became clear this was more than just a battle. The Dravak had been hunting for centuries, conquering entire planets with ruthless efficiency. This wasn't just an invasion. It was a hunt, and humans were now their prey. On the front lines, Pierce watched as Dravak warriors poured out of their ships, their armor gleaming in the dying light of the day. Their appearance was unsettling. Clawed hands, elongated skulls, and eyes that glowed with an unnatural hunger. They were predators in every sense of the word. But Pierce wasn't afraid. He knew one thing the Dravak didn't: humanity wasn't going down without a fight. The trap was set. The first human victory, small as it was, would mark the beginning of a brutal struggle, one the Dravak had no idea they were walking into. The hunt had begun. The Dravak warships hovered like vultures over the wreckage of what was once a thriving human colony. The scent of burning buildings, the acrid tang of plasma fire, and the distant screams of those still caught in the chaos filled the air. Yet, despite the devastation, Earth's fighters were relentless. They refused to break. Captain Aiden Pierce stood tall among them, his mind calculating the next step in a war that had escalated far beyond expectations. On the ground, the Dravak forces advanced. Their warriors were imposing, clad in sleek, black armor adorned with jagged metal plates, their faces hidden behind grotesque alien visors. With their advanced technology and predatory instincts, they made the perfect killing machines. The humans, however, fought with an unyielding spirit, using the terrain to their advantage. Guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run strikes, and improvised weapons were now their greatest assets. Pierce's forces, comprising elite soldiers, engineers, and civilians who had been trained in basic defense, had already ambushed the Dravak on two fronts, using everything they had at their disposal. Human ingenuity, as it turned out, was the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy. It didn't matter that their ships were outclassed, or that their laser cannons couldn't match the firepower of the Dravak's weapons. What mattered was that humans adapted. They learned, they fought, and they never gave up. With each passing hour, the tide began to shift. The Dravak, accustomed to overwhelming their enemies with sheer might, found themselves forced into a defensive position for the first time in centuries. Pierce could see the subtle signs, uncertainty creeping into their once confident ranks. The invaders weren't used to being hunted. "Target those weak points on the flank," Pierce ordered, his voice sharp and unwavering, as his team set up the next round of ambushes. A hail of gunfire rang out, slamming into the Dravak's armored units, their shields flickering but holding. It was only a matter of time before their defenses began to crumble. The humans, relentless in their pursuit, had a strategy that worked. Outlast the Dravak, exploit their overconfidence, and strike when they least expected it. The humans had no choice but to be creative. They began using the very terrain the Dravak had initially seen as their advantage. Where the Dravak used sophisticated scanners to detect movement, the humans used deception. Disguised tunnels, reflective surfaces to confuse their technology, and even setting fire to nearby woods to create smoke screens. Every corner was a potential trap, and the Dravak soon realized they could no longer predict the humans' movements. For every Dravak warrior that fell, humanity gained a small but invaluable victory. But as the battle raged on, something unsettling began to become clear to Captain Pierce. Despite the victories, the Dravak were not just fighting. They were observing. Every time the humans struck, it felt as though they were being tested. The Dravak weren't just here to conquer Earth. They were here to learn, to hunt, and to see what humanity was truly capable of. An urgent transmission interrupted his thoughts, and Pierce's heart sank. It was from Earth's Space Command, relaying a warning from their deepest satellites. The Dravak warship Blood Moon. "It's on its way." The voice on the other end crackled, panic barely hidden beneath its calm exterior. "This is it. They're bringing in the heavy guns." The realization hit him like a blow to the chest. If humanity couldn't hold the line soon, the Blood Moon would reduce Earth's defenses to rubble in minutes. The stakes had just reached a new level. The fight for Earth was no longer just a matter of survival. It was a matter of whether humanity could rise to the challenge before they were eradicated entirely. As the first tremors of the Blood Moon's arrival began to shake the ground beneath their feet, Captain Pierce turned to his soldiers. His expression was steely, unwavering. "Prepare for the worst," he said, his voice steady, "and show them what humanity is made of." The battle was about to enter its next, far more dangerous phase. But Pierce wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The ground trembled as the massive shadow of the Blood Moon stretched across the sky, its metallic hull gleaming like a monstrous predator's talons. The ship's descent was slow, deliberate, intimidating. Humanity had never faced an opponent with such raw, unrestrained power. Pierce stood in the command center, eyes glued to the display. The Blood Moon wasn't just another warship. It was a fortress, a symbol of the Dravak's belief in their invincibility. They weren't just here to win. They were here to crush. "Garrick, what's our status on the air support?" Pierce asked, his voice cool despite the tension tightening in his chest. Garrick, a seasoned pilot, shook his head, frustration creeping into his usually calm demeanor. "We've got nothing left, Captain. The Blood Moon's jamming tech is crippling our communications. Our fighters can't get close, and the rest of our air units are grounded." Pierce clenched his fists. Without air support, the battle was all but lost. The humans' best chance to stand a chance lay in their ability to outthink the Dravak, not overpower them. The Dravak were hunters, yes, but they were also creatures of habit. If they could learn their prey's behavior, they might be able to turn the tables. But first, they needed to understand how the Dravak hunted. He turned to Lieutenant Harlow, his most trusted strategist. "Harlow, we need eyes on their movements. I want to know exactly how they're operating, what makes them tick. If we don't know how they're hunting us, we're dead." Harlow nodded. "I'll assemble a team and get them on the ground near their landing zones. I'm thinking a mix of scouts and tech specialists. We'll use the terrain to our advantage, but we'll need to move fast." "Get it done," Pierce replied sharply. "We need to learn how the Dravak operate in the field. Fast. If we're going to win this, we need to fight smarter." Meanwhile, the Dravak were already closing in. The first wave of their forces hit the colony's outskirts, their brutal efficiency evident in every move. They weren't just soldiers. They were hunters, using every ounce of their preternatural skills to track and eliminate any humans that dared to resist. The Dravak operated with terrifying precision. They employed drones to scout the landscape, utilizing heat signatures and advanced tracking systems to locate their prey. Their warriors, moving in tight formations, were armed with advanced plasma rifles and energy shields, capable of cutting down anything in their path. They were a perfect hunting machine, a combination of strength, technology, and ruthless calculation. To the Dravak, humanity was little more than prey in a game, and they relished the kill. But Pierce's team was beginning to see cracks in the Dravak's armor. Despite their superior technology, the Dravak seemed to struggle with an unpredictable factor, something the humans had in abundance. In their desire to dominate, the Dravak had underestimated the human capacity for ingenuity and creativity. Pierce watched as his scouts, now embedded deep in the enemy's territory, sent back data. They were documenting the Dravak's movements, learning how they hunted. They discovered that the Dravak's tactics, though effective, had patterns, repetitive patterns that could be exploited. "They're overconfident," Harlow said after analyzing the intel. "They expect us to act in predictable ways. They've been hunting civilizations that couldn't adapt, couldn't change. But we're different. We learn." The realization hit like a thunderclap. The Dravak had never fought an enemy like humanity before. Their overconfidence was their biggest weakness. If humans could keep adapting, it might just stand a chance. "All right," Pierce said, his voice now full of cold determination. "We'll make them regret ever thinking they could hunt us." The hunt had begun, but the tables were slowly beginning to turn. Pierce had a plan now, one that involved using the Dravak's own arrogance against them. If the Dravak thought they were the hunters, humanity was about to show them how deadly prey could be. Pierce looked out at the horizon, the blood moon looming in the sky like a dark omen. "We'll make them fight for every inch of this planet," he muttered, clenching his fist. "And we'll make them bleed." The first sign that the Dravak were beginning to falter came in the form of a small but crucial victory. A team of human scouts, using the cover of night, managed to sabotage a Dravak supply convoy that had been reinforcing the forward operating base. The Dravak hadn't expected it. Human tactics were becoming more unpredictable by the hour. Captain Pierce stood in the command center, staring at the tactical map. It was a mess of red markers indicating Dravak forces and yellow ones showing human positions. But now, the reds were beginning to dwindle, their lines faltering as the humans, hidden in plain sight, struck from unexpected angles. "The Dravak are reacting faster than we anticipated," Lieutenant Harlow said, her voice tense. "They've adjusted their strategies, begun to reinforce the weak points. But they still underestimate us." Pierce ran a hand through his hair, frustration gnawing at him. The humans had gained ground, but the Dravak were adapting too. Their hunters were learning, and with each passing day, they grew more dangerous. They had always been ruthless, but now they were becoming a reflection of humanity's own ingenuity, a true mirror image. "We need to keep pushing them into unknown territory," Pierce said, his mind racing. "The Dravak think they can predict our next move. They rely too much on their technology. If we can throw them off balance just one more time, we can break their momentum." "How do you propose we do that, sir?" Harlow asked, her brow furrowed. Pierce's eyes gleamed with a dangerous resolve. "We lure them into a trap, but not the kind they expect. They believe we're predictable, that we're scrambling to fight back. Let's show them we're capable of much more. We'll hit them where they think they're strongest." Pierce's plan was audacious, a series of decoys, false retreats, and feigned weakness. They would allow the Dravak to believe they were winning, only to turn the tables at the last possible moment. The key was psychological warfare, knowing that the Dravak's pride and arrogance would be their undoing. If the Dravak believed they had finally cornered humanity, the humans could strike with overwhelming force at the right moment, taking out the enemy's most crucial leaders. The plan unfolded quickly. As the Dravak pushed deeper into the city outskirts, they fell for the human ruse. The humans seemed to be scattering, retreating into the vast forests and mountainous regions, leaving behind only the remains of a few small outposts. The Dravak were overconfident, as expected. They pursued relentlessly, drawing closer to what they thought was an easy victory. But Pierce had a surprise waiting for them. Hidden in the forest, a series of carefully crafted traps lay in wait, sophisticated minefields, explosive charges, and strategically placed ambush points. It was humanity's way of using their environment against the Dravak, and for the first time, the humans had caught the Dravak off guard. The first explosion rang out, deafening in the still air. A Dravak convoy was blown apart, sending wreckage and debris flying in all directions. The Dravak soldiers scrambled, their battle formations crumbling under the weight of the surprise attack. Pierce's forces emerged from the shadows, fierce and precise, striking like a thunderclap in the night. The Dravak were thrown into disarray, their advanced tracking systems unable to keep up with the ferocity and unpredictability of human tactics. "Now," Pierce shouted, his voice sharp with command. The human fighters surged forward, hammering the Dravak from all sides. The Dravak, used to crushing weak civilizations with ease, had not anticipated such resistance. They fought back with deadly force, but it was clear they were no longer in control. The tables had turned. The humans weren't just defending. They were fighting with purpose, intelligence, and a deep-seated will to survive. By the time the Dravak managed to regroup, their forces had already been severely diminished. The humans had taken out key leadership figures in the chaos, causing further confusion within the Dravak ranks. They were no longer a cohesive fighting force. They were scattered, vulnerable. As the last Dravak fell, Pierce surveyed the battlefield. The victory wasn't complete yet, but it was undeniable. Humanity had landed its first true blow. The Dravak had come to Earth believing they were the apex predators, but humanity had just shown them that even prey could be deadly. Pierce's heart hammered in his chest as he looked toward the horizon, where the looming shadow of the blood moon still hovered. The Dravak might have underestimated humanity once, but that was no longer the case. The galaxy's deadliest hunters had just met their match. And it was only the beginning. In the days following the surprise ambush, the Dravak had begun to regroup. They had learned their first painful lesson. Humanity was not the weak prey they had assumed, but with every victory the humans achieved, the price of their resilience grew heavier. The Dravak, now in rage, were relentless in their pursuit, and Earth's forces were stretched thin. The harsh reality of war began to settle over the survivors, and it became clear that while humanity had struck a blow, they weren't yet out of danger. Captain Pierce stood on the front lines once again, this time overseeing a much smaller force. The Dravak were digging in, fortifying their positions with alarming speed. The initial momentum had been theirs, but the tide was shifting. Earth had become the battleground for a war that seemed to have no end. Even with the advances they had made, Pierce knew that humanity's survival rested on their ability to maintain their momentum. As he surveyed the land, he was reminded of the true cost of their victories. The fields where the Dravak had once marched were now littered with the bodies of fallen soldiers, both human and Dravak. Every victory came with its share of sacrifices, and there were fewer and fewer bodies to spare. Earth's defenses were crumbling under the strain. "We've got a serious problem, sir," Lieutenant Harlow's voice crackled over the comlink, pulling Pierce from his thoughts. "The Dravak aren't just fighting. They're digging in deeper. They're building something massive. Looks like they're preparing for a final push." Pierce's heart sank. The blood moon had already inflicted significant damage on Earth's orbiting defenses, and now the Dravak were preparing for the decisive blow. The fight was escalating, and if humanity didn't act soon, the invaders would crush the resistance for good. "Send in every available unit," Pierce ordered, his voice firm. "We're going to hit them before they finish whatever they're planning. We don't have the luxury of waiting." The team moved swiftly, organizing the last remaining forces into an assault plan that, by all accounts, should have been impossible. They would strike at the heart of the Dravak encampment, deep within the forest. Pierce had no illusions about the risks. This would be a desperate, all-or-nothing gambit. But humanity had no other choice. The Dravak had to be stopped now. As the soldiers mobilized, Pierce walked over to his closest ally, Captain Naomi Blakesley, one of the finest tactical minds Earth had. She was preparing her squad for the mission, and the weight of their shared understanding hung heavily in the air. "We're going to lose a lot of good people today," Naomi said quietly, not bothering to mask the worry in her voice. Pierce nodded solemnly. "I know. But if we don't make this work, Earth will fall. We can't let that happen. Not after everything we'd fought for." Naomi's eyes hardened with resolve. "Let's make sure it counts." The assault on the Dravak command center was underway. The plan was simple but perilous. Infiltrate the heart of the Dravak base and sabotage their primary weapon systems before they could launch a final assault on the planet. The humans' greatest advantage now was speed and stealth. If they could get in and out undetected, they might have a chance of crippling the Dravak war effort. But nothing ever went as planned. As the squad moved deeper into the enemy lines, their progress slowed. The Dravak were no longer caught off guard by human ingenuity. Their forces had adapted, setting traps and ambushes of their own. Every step was met with resistance, and the closer they got to the command center, the more perilous it became. "We're too close," Naomi muttered, looking at the clock ticking down. "If we don't do this in the next 20 minutes, it's over." The squad braced for impact, knowing that at any moment they could be discovered. The tension was palpable, each soldier knowing the sacrifice they were about to make. And then, as the final breach was made, everything went wrong. A loud explosion rocked the area, sending the team into disarray. The Dravak had anticipated the assault. They were ready. Humans weren't the only ones who could think outside the box, and now the full weight of that realization hit them hard. Pierce's mind raced. This wasn't just a setback. It was a warning. The Dravak had adapted faster than they ever could have imagined. And the final battle for Earth was about to begin. The question now wasn't whether humanity could survive. It was whether they could outlast an enemy that learned just as quickly as they did. As Pierce's forces fought to regain control, he knew one thing for sure. The war was far from over. The Dravak would never stop hunting until they had exterminated every last human. But the humans were far from finished. The deadliest hunters of the galaxy had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated humanity. And now, humanity was fighting back with everything it had. And it was about to get much, much worse. The blast had sent shockwaves through the command center, rattling the very earth beneath their feet. Pierce's heart pounded as the air thickened with the stench of burning debris and the metallic taste of smoke. His soldiers scrambled to regain control, some wounded, others struggling to re-establish communication with the rest of their scattered forces. The Dravak had anticipated their move, and the element of surprise was gone. The trap had been sprung, and the humans were now in the Dravak's deadly sights. "Fall back. Regroup on my position," Pierce shouted into the chaos, his voice commanding but filled with urgency. His squad responded immediately, but there was no denying the grim reality. This mission had just become a one-way ticket to oblivion if they couldn't turn the tide. Lieutenant Harlow, her face streaked with soot, moved to Pierce's side, her eyes sharp with focus despite the danger. "The Dravak are moving in fast, Captain. They've got us surrounded. The flanks are compromised." Pierce glanced at the tactical display, where red icons began to flash, representing the Dravak forces tightening around the human position. Their once confident hunters were now pursuing them with the ruthless efficiency of predators closing in on their prey. It was clear the Dravak had finally learned that humanity's strength lay in unpredictability, and they were adapting with terrifying speed. "We don't have time to retreat any farther," Pierce said, his voice steady, though his mind raced. "We fight here. This is the line in the sand. We make our stand, or we lose everything. His soldiers, battle-worn and weary, nodded in agreement. They had seen the horrors of war, but none of them had faced an enemy like the Dravak, an alien species that could shift and adapt with every move they made. But humanity had one final advantage: their relentless drive to survive, even in the face of certain defeat. "We're going to make them regret ever stepping foot on this planet," Pierce muttered, gripping his weapon tightly. "Set up defensive positions. Focus on the command center. Take out their leadership. That's our only shot." The soldiers worked quickly, using their knowledge of the terrain to set traps, lay explosives, and fortify their positions. Despite their dwindling numbers, the humans fought with a fury that surprised even the Dravak. Every inch gained was hard-won. Every Dravak warrior felled a small, but significant victory. The tide of battle was no longer one-sided, though the outcome still seemed uncertain. A loud screech pierced the air as Dravak war machines descended from the skies, their dark forms blocking out the sun. The humans' air support had been wiped out in earlier skirmishes, and now the Dravak were coming in full force, their warships like harbingers of doom. But Pierce wasn't intimidated. He had no illusions about what would happen if they failed. It was now or never. "Stay focused," Pierce shouted over the comlink, his voice a mixture of raw determination and urgency. "Target their weak points, their engines. If we can cripple their ships, the Dravak will lose their advantage." He moved with calculated precision, issuing orders as his team set up explosives on key strategic targets, fuel tanks, energy conduits, and command towers. They had to dismantle the Dravak's war machinery piece by piece. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot they had. As the Dravak descended, the air grew thick with tension. The first human shots rang out, targeting weak points on the massive Dravak warships. The explosions were smaller than expected, but they were enough to send a ripple of confusion through the enemy ranks. For the first time, the Dravak were forced to adapt in real time, their warriors scrambling to reinforce their ships' failing defenses. The humans pressed their advantage, despite their dwindling numbers. Pierce's heart raced as the battlefield became a blur of gunfire, explosions, and the cries of wounded soldiers. They were giving everything they had to slow the Dravak advance, but there was still no guarantee they would win. The cost of the battle was already high, but humanity wasn't ready to surrender. Then, amidst the chaos, something unexpected happened. A blast from one of the Dravak warships shattered the silence, and for a moment, Pierce thought they were finished. But when the smoke cleared, a massive fissure opened up in the hull of the ship. It was a critical strike. A weakness had been exposed. "Target that breach," Pierce roared, pointing to the opening in the enemy vessel. "Now, everyone, fire with everything you've got." Human soldiers poured fire into the gap, targeting the heart of the Dravak warship. In a glorious, thunderous moment, the ship erupted, sending a shockwave that sent nearby Dravak soldiers flying. The enemy's air superiority had just been shattered. Pierce's eyes widened with disbelief. They had done it. Against all odds, the Dravak had been dealt a devastating blow. But Pierce knew this was only the beginning. The Dravak were relentless, and they would come at them again, harder than before. The true fight for Earth had only just begun. With the first victory under their belt, humanity had sent a powerful message to the galaxy's deadliest hunters. Earth would not go down without a fight. And the Dravak had just learned that their prey was not so easily vanquished. The moment the Dravak warship exploded, a deafening silence blanketed the battlefield. For a fleeting second, the humans stood in disbelief, watching the massive ship break apart in midair, its debris scattering across the horizon. But there was no time for celebration. The Dravak, enraged by the loss of one of their flagships, had already begun organizing their forces for a brutal counterattack. Humanity had struck a blow, yes, but the war was far from over. Captain Pierce stood tall amidst the chaos, his mind focused. His soldiers were battered, fatigued, but something else burned in their eyes. Hope. The Dravak had underestimated humanity before, but now the balance of power had shifted. The Dravak were no longer invincible, and the humans had learned to exploit their weaknesses. "We have one shot at this," Pierce said, his voice cutting through the noise as his squad gathered around him. "We crippled their air superiority, but they still have overwhelming numbers. We've delayed them, but if we don't finish this now, we'll never get another chance." Lieutenant Harlow nodded, determination etched on her face. The Dravak have been rallying for a final push. Their ground forces are already assembling outside the city. If they get organized, we won't be able to stop them. Pierce's eyes darkened. He knew it was now or never. The humans had spent months on the defensive, learning the Dravak's tactics, striking where they least expected it, but the war had drained Earth's resources and manpower. The Dravak's relentless onslaught had left entire cities in ruins, and humanity was running low on supplies. "We need to hit them where it hurts, right at the core of their command," Pierce said, voice steady, yet urgent. "We know where their command structure is located, and we got to disable their leadership once and for all. If we can take out their high command, the rest of their forces will crumble." There was a collective nod of agreement. The team knew the risks. If they failed, it would mean the end of humanity's resistance. But if they succeeded, they could break the Dravak's will to fight. The plan was daring, risky beyond measure, but Pierce had no illusions. They were at the edge of extinction. If they didn't push for one last, decisive strike, Earth would fall. The humans moved quickly, forming into small, agile squads designed for infiltration. Their goal was simple: penetrate the heart of the Dravak's stronghold, locate their high command, and take them out. The mission was suicide for most of them, but they couldn't afford to hesitate. Every soldier knew that this was humanity's last push, and failure wasn't an option. As they advanced toward the Dravak base, Pierce's thoughts raced. The Dravak had grown too comfortable, too cocky. They thought they could hunt humanity like all the other species they'd wiped out, but they had made one fatal mistake. They didn't understand human will. Every time the Dravak thought they had broken Earth's resolve, humanity had come back stronger. And now, the final blow would be theirs to deliver. The Dravak's fortress loomed ahead, a massive structure built into the side of a jagged mountain. Its outer defenses were formidable, but the humans had a secret weapon: human ingenuity. Pierce and his team had been preparing for this moment, planting explosives along key structural points, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. 30 minutes until detonation, Harlow whispered as they approached the perimeter of the Dravak base. "We need to move fast." The squad advanced with careful precision, utilizing the cover of darkness to move undetected. The Dravak, still recovering from the earlier assault, were spread thin, underestimating the humans' ability to infiltrate their stronghold. As they entered the heart of the fortress, Pierce felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. This was it. They were deep behind enemy lines, and failure now meant the end. Inside the fortress, they found the Dravak Command Center, a towering structure filled with alien technology and heavily armed guards. The humans had studied their enemies' tactics long enough to know how they operated. Pierce's squad moved swiftly, using silenced weapons and hand-to-hand combat to neutralize the Dravak sentries. The chaos in the base provided them with the perfect cover. Finally, they'd reached the control room, the nerve center of the Dravak's operations. As Pierce and Harlow entered, they found the Dravak High Command, alien leaders standing at their consoles, unaware of the threat approaching them. The clock was ticking. Pierce's heart raced, but his resolve remained unshaken. He nodded to Harlow, who gave the signal. In a flash, the squad surged forward, disabling the Dravak leaders before they could react. The Dravak High Command was no more. But as the mission seemed to succeed, something unexpected happened. The ground beneath them began to shake. The Dravak had anticipated this move. A massive fail-safe system had been triggered, and the base was about to self-destruct. The countdown had already begun. "Time's up," Pierce said, his voice grim. "Get out now." With the Dravak leadership gone, the squad raced against time, their way out fraught with peril. The blast radius of the self-destruction would wipe out everything in its path. As the countdown reached its final seconds, Pierce led his team through the crumbling corridors, the walls trembling with each passing moment. In that final, frantic sprint for their lives, one thing became clear. Humanity's last stand had just turned the tide in the war. The Dravak were no longer the hunters. They were the hunted. And Earth had just reclaimed its future. The explosion that tore through the Dravak fortress was unlike anything Pierce had ever witnessed. The shockwave seemed to pulse through the very air, sending tremors across the land as the mountain itself seemed to shake and crumble. The blast was so intense that it lit up the night sky, casting a fiery glow over the battlefield below. For a moment, the world held its breath. Pierce and his team had barely escaped the explosion by the skin of their teeth. They had sprinted through collapsing tunnels and narrowly avoided falling debris. But as the dust began to settle, they knew they had struck the final blow. The Dravak leadership was dead. The heart of their operation had been obliterated. The invaders, once so confident in their ability to conquer and destroy, were now leaderless, disorganized, and reeling from the loss. This is it," Lieutenant Harlow said, her voice hoarse, as she wiped sweat from her brow. Her face was streaked with dirt and blood, but her eyes shone with the same fire they'd had when they'd first set out. "We've done it. The Dravak won't be able to recover from this." Pierce nodded, his expression grim but filled with a sense of quiet relief. The battle wasn't over yet, but it was clear. Earth had taken the first step toward victory. The Dravak had no plan, no leadership, and their war machines were in disarray. They had underestimated humanity, and now the hunters had become the hunted. Still, Pierce knew the cost. His team had lost good men and women, heroes who had given everything for this moment. The battlefield was littered with the bodies of both human and Dravak soldiers, and while the Dravak forces were retreating, the scars of war would never fade. Earth had been pushed to the edge of destruction, but it had endured. The days following the destruction of the Dravak command were filled with chaotic celebrations, mixed with a palpable sense of caution. The Dravak forces that had been left scattered across Earth were no longer united. With their leadership gone, their advance had slowed, and scattered resistance was all that remained. But despite their disarray, the Dravak were not entirely defeated. They had been humiliated, but they were still dangerous. "Pierce, we need to press our advantage," Harlow said as they reviewed their next move. "We can't give them the chance to regroup. We need to hit them hard, break their remaining hold on Earth before they regroup." Pierce stared at the map in front of him, his mind racing. The Dravak had suffered a catastrophic blow, but Earth still needed to hold its ground. With their leadership decimated and their forces scattered, the final push could decide everything. But the price would be steep. The human resistance was already stretched thin, and they couldn't afford to lose more ground. "We strike now," Pierce finally said. "We take back the cities they still control, and we don't stop until every last Dravak is driven off this planet. But we'll need every available fighter, every last ounce of energy. If we make this our final stand, one way or another, we finish this." The remaining human forces, tired and worn from months of constant battle, rallied under Pierce's leadership. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing. The sacrifices of the past months had forged something stronger than simple resolve. It was a collective will to survive, an unbreakable unity in the face of annihilation. Humanity had fought back, and now they were going to finish what they started. The final assault began as a coordinated push against the remaining Dravak strongholds, targeting key locations that still held strategic value. The human forces, though battered, were fierce in their counteroffensive. With the Dravak struggling to regain any semblance of control, their once advanced technology now malfunctioning, and their command structure in ruins, they were forced into retreat. The last remnants of Dravak forces scattered, their morale shattered, their power crumbling. Earth's resistance forces, emboldened by their victories and the sacrifices of their fallen comrades, surged forward with unmatched fury. The Dravak, once the galaxy's deadliest hunters, were on the run. As Pierce stood in the ruins of a once great Dravak stronghold, watching the final waves of battle unfold, the enormity of what they had achieved began to sink in. The Earth was battered, scared by the war, but it had endured. Humanity had fought back against the galaxy's deadliest hunters, and they had emerged victorious. A new dawn was breaking over Earth, the first rays of sunlight piercing through the smoke-filled sky. The war wasn't over. There would be rebuilding. There would be grief, and there would be wounds to heal. But one thing was certain. Humanity had shown the galaxy what they were capable of. They had stared down extinction and come out victorious. "We did it," Harlow said quietly, her eyes searching the horizon. Pierce nodded, his gaze distant but filled with quiet pride. "Yes, we did. But this is just the beginning. We've shown them we're more than just survivors. We're hunters too." The war was over, but humanity's story, their rise from the brink of annihilation, was just beginning. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. Never underestimate the human spirit. The deadliest hunters in the galaxy had met their match, and Earth had just proved it.